Hey friends, welcome back to the Divorce Clarity Studio. I'm your host, Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. I'm also a retired lawyer, a Jewish educator, a spiritual counselor, and a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids. My life has taken a lot of turns, some very unexpected, but as Stephen Sondheim writes, I'm still here. And if you're here, you're likely looking for something to answer your uncertainty. My goal is to guide you through with clarity, steadiness, and support. And one of the ways I do that is by drawing on Jewish tradition. I have found the beauty of our Jewish tradition is that when we actually look at our ancient texts, when we dig deep, they speak to us. And I only learned that as an adult. I found hidden treasures when I was looking for answers that I was afraid to ask. And what I know for sure is that these texts spoke to me when I was struggling, when I was in my own narrow place, and when I had to make my own difficult divorce decisions. In some ways, the text gave me the courage I needed to move forward. So I want to share the power of that learning with all of you. And this is for you, whether you know a lot about Judaism or nothing at all, whether you went to Hebrew school as a kid or cut class most of the time, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish. This tradition has so much to teach all of us today. And I promise you that you will find meaning in these ancient teachings because this is not about religious dogma. It's about being human. Because at the end of the day, these are human stories. Stories about fear, about change, about courage, about loss, and about becoming. And these stories have been guiding people through life's hardest moments for thousands of years. So wherever you're coming from, you are welcome here. So let's get into it with some divorce clarity. Okay. When you're thinking about divorce, there's a good chance that something feels off, really off. Things are confusing, they're heavy, even paralyzing. Your mind won't stop spinning and you are replaying conversations over and over. You're trying to make a decision, but you just can't land anywhere. And this is the divorce fog. Should I stay or should I go? Am I making the right decisions? How can I make any decisions? You are in a narrow place and you feel tight. Maybe you're doing all the things you think you're supposed to be doing to prepare for divorce. You're making lists, you're talking to people, you're gathering information, but somehow you still feel stuck. And if that's where you are, I want you to hear this right from the start. There is nothing wrong with you. What you're feeling right now has a name, and that name is tsar. It's a Hebrew word that translates as narrow, a place of constriction. And that's what I want to raise up today, that feeling of narrowness, tightness. When you feel like you can't think clearly, you are not failing. You're in the narrow place. And when people think about divorce, they can become overwhelmed by the big decisions they have to make. There are legal decisions, financial decisions, parenting decisions, lawyer decisions. Who is the professional I need? Where am I going to live? This spinning continues. And that's all true and frighteningly real. These are decisions that are hard, and most people start in this fog, in this overwhelm, in this place where they don't even know what questions to ask. And that can feel incredibly disorienting, especially if you're someone who is used to being able to know the answers. If you see yourself as capable, thoughtful, on top of things, when you are in the fog, some part of you is not resonating with the self-relevance, the identity that you have for yourself. And if what's making this harder is the voice in your head that's saying to you, why can't I figure this out? I should be better at handling this. Let me gently interrupt that voice, because what's happening here is not a failure of intelligence. It's not a failure of strength. It's actually your nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do when something feels threatening, uncertain, or overwhelming. When we go through something like divorce, our system shifts in protection mode. And in that state, clarity becomes hard to access, not because it's gone, but because your brain is prioritizing safety over strategy. If I don't rock the boat, if things stay the same, I'll be able to manage because I know what this space feels like. But thinking about going outside of what you know, about risking upsetting the cart, upsetting your partner, that's when we go into the spin. So now there's a line in the Torah, which is the Jewish Bible, when the Israelites are still in Egypt, still enslaved, still disempowered, that says in Hebrew, V'lo shimu el Moshe mikotzer ruach. They could not hear Moses because of shortness of spirit. They could not hear. When do you feel like you can't hear? You can't process. You simply have too much on your plate. How do you make space when you are in the center of the tornado? My answer is breathe. Take a deep breath. So many of my clients thank me for reminding them to breathe. Something that's automatic and central to the act of living goes on autopilot, and we forget that we have control. Just breathe. Take a breath. And now, let's go deeper. The metaphor continues, and what an incredible metaphor it is. They had a shortness of spirit, not because they weren't capable, not because they didn't want freedom, but because they were so crushed and overwhelmed by their bondage that they couldn't even hear or believe the message. So think about this. What if the issue wasn't Moses' message? What if the issue was that freedom felt so impossible, so foreign to their reality, that their hearts literally couldn't hold it? Sometimes we can't hear what we need to hear because we're not ready to believe that it could be true for us. I think about that a lot in the context of divorce because so many women, so many men come to this process, smart, thoughtful, deeply capable people, and suddenly they feel like they can't think straight. They can't decide. They can't even hear good advice, and they think, what's wrong with me? The answer is nothing. You are in Kotzer Ruach, a constricted emotional space. And noticing that you're in the space, that's the first step. That interrupts the tightness. Because what matters most in this phase is not that you figure everything out. It's that you begin to understand where you are. Because when you can name this as a narrow place, something begins to soften. You move from what's wrong with me to, aha, this is where I am right now. And that shift alone creates a little more space. So I want you to pause there just for a minute. Because Kotzer Ruach isn't just spiritual. It's deeply human for all of us. And I want you to take this idea and apply it to wherever you are in the process. Ask yourself, what does shortness of spirit mean to me? For me, it means that my heart hurts. My soul feels crushed. I judge myself. I have too much to handle, and I'm scared. I feel alone. I want to find a way back to my soul, and that's when I breathe. I take a breath and I get present in my body, in my space, and I think about what I have, what I am grateful for. How can I get out of my own way and find my way back to light? Now, I can understand if spiritual language doesn't speak to you. So I'm going to move it from the spiritual space to the scientific space. And I'm talking about neuroscience. When you're in a moment of stress or threat like divorce, the most primal part of your brain, called the amygdala, fires up. You can think of it like an alarm system. It's scanning for danger, trying to protect you, getting you ready to react. And when that alarm is loud, another part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, what's in front, that part that helps you think clearly, make decisions, see the bigger picture, it goes a little offline. So suddenly, you can't think the way you normally do. You can't access the clarity you're used to. You can't always hear good advice, even if it's right in front of you. And then when that happens, most people assume, I'm not handling this well. I should be doing this better. But what if this isn't a failure? But it's exactly what that Torah line is describing, and it's scientific. They couldn't hear because they had to protect themselves from disappointment, from danger, from change. Everything inside them was on fire. Your limbic system is trying to protect you, and your brain is doing its job. In this space, you don't need more pressure, you need more space. And that's where we begin to gently shift, not by forcing clarity, but by creating just enough calm for the inner part of your brain to come back online. Take a breath, pause, interrupt the cycle, and recognize that you don't have to do everything all at once. You don't have to have everything figured out. Your first step may be simply preparing to take that first step. And here's what it might feel like in your body right now. Maybe your chest feels tight. Maybe your shoulders are carrying weight that you can't name. Maybe your breathing has gotten shallow without you even noticing. This isn't just emotional. Kotzer Ruach lives in our bodies too. So as you're listening, see if you can soften your jaw. Let your shoulders drop just a little. This is part of creating space. For some of us, that means getting real with what we know. We know we're in a tight spot, a narrow place. We know that our life feels in disarray. We know deep inside that something has to change, but we don't know if we're brave enough to make that change happen. And that brings me to another teaching that I come back to so often. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to walk away from it. And what that means in the context of divorce is take the first step. Just start. Maybe even start before you're ready. Start before you have everything figured out. Just take one small step. One step toward a different future. And one step that answers a small question on the way to the bigger journey. So let me ask you, what's your next step forward? For the Israelites, maybe they needed to open their ears and listen. Maybe they couldn't hear because they simply weren't ready. Maybe they could listen, but they simply couldn't understand. Change was impossible to comprehend after all those years of slavery. They needed to take a breath. They needed proof that their lives could change. They needed to get present and soften so they could be ready for what was next. We'll get deep to this in our next podcast, but I'm going to ask you now about your next step forward. What are you going to do? And before we close, I'm going to leave you with a quiet thought from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who teaches, we are not called to be certain, we're called to be present. We are not called to have all the answers, but to stay awake to our lives as they are unfolding. So let's take that invitation right now, not to solve everything, not to rush out of the narrow space, but to soften just enough to notice where you are, to honor this moment, even in its uncertainty, because this moment is part of your becoming. So before you move on with your day, put your hand on your heart, feel it beating. Remember, that heartbeat has been with you through every narrow place you've ever survived, and it's still here. You're still here. And that's not nothing. That's everything. May you find a little more space in your breath, a little more steadiness in your body, and a quiet trust that even here, you're already beginning to move. So, I'm really glad you're here, and I'll walk you through this. You're listening to the Divorce Clarity Studio with me, Lisa Lisser. Please reach out to me with any thoughts or questions at lisa@lzlcoaching.com. Check out my website, www.lzlcoaching.com, and share this with a friend or anyone who needs a little dose of Yiddishkeit to move through their day. Bye-bye.